Hello and welcome to Indus News live from Islamabad. I'm Jofat Tehami and these are the headlines. In India, farmer unions have called for a nationwide strike on the 26th of March to mark 4 months of agitation. They are demanding the government to repeal the laws they say threaten their livelihood and favor big corporates. Nearly 250 farmers have died during the agitation since November last year. Prime Minister Imran Khan has reaffirmed Pakistan's resolve to forge closer ties with Central Asia based on peace, development and connectivity. He was talking to Uzbek Foreign Minister Abdulaziz Kamilov, who called on him in Islamabad. Later, in a meeting with Army Chief General Qamar Javed Bajwa, Kamilov appreciated Pakistan's role in the Afghan peace process. Libya's parliament has approved the new interim government formed by Prime Minister Abdul Hamid Dabibe. The Prime Minister's cabinet was approved by 132 votes to 2 at a session in Surat. His government will lead the country through elections scheduled for the 24th of December under a UN-brokered plan. President Hassan Rouhani has slammed the US for anti-Iran sanctions, calling them oppression against Tehran. Speaking at the cabinet meeting, Rouhani urged Washington not to postpone steps to resume implementation of international laws. Rouhani's remarks came after the US imposed new sanctions on Iran, targeting 2 officials of Revolutionary Guards. Pakistan has announced closure of schools and other restrictions to curb the increasing number of coronavirus cases. Pakistan is also starting vaccinations of people over 60 years of age against coronavirus from today. The country has registered over 1,700 new cases and 43 deaths overnight, while the tally climbs to 13,300. Globally, the virus has claimed more than 2.6 million lives and infected over 117 million people so far. And in cricket, Afghanistan 307 for 3 against Zimbabwe at the end of the first day of the second test in Abu Dhabi. A century by skipper Asghar Khan put his side in a commanding position. Zimbabwe lead the 2-match series 1-0 after beating Afghanistan in the first test by 10 wickets. Those were the headlines and detailed stories right after a short break. Stay tuned. Welcome back, and now for the news in detail. In India, farmer unions have called for a nationwide strike on the 26th of March to mark 4 months of agitation. They are demanding the government to repeal the laws they say threaten their livelihood and favor big corporates. The unions have slammed Prime Minister Narendra Modi's apathy and indifference to the suffering of farmers over the past 100 days of protest. Nearly 250 farmers have died during their agitation since November last year. Their movement has gained international support, including from celebrities such as climate activist Greta Thunberg and US singer Rihanna. Prime Minister Imran Khan has reaffirmed Pakistan's resolve to forge closer ties with Central Asia based on peace, development and connectivity. He was talking to Uzbek Foreign Minister Abdulaziz Kamilov, who called on him in Islamabad. The Prime Minister said enhanced trade and regional connectivity between Pakistan and Uzbekistan are vital to economic development. He added that Pakistan is committed to early completion of the Trans-Afghan Railway project, connecting Pakistan, Uzbekistan and Afghanistan. Later, the foreign minister held separate meetings with his Pakistani counterpart Shah Mahmood Qureshi and Army Chief General Qamar Javed Bajwa. In a statement, the military's media wing said the visiting dignitary lauded Pakistan's role in the Afghan peace process. The Director General of Inter-Services Intelligence, Lieutenant General Faiz Hamid, was also present in the meeting. Russia has invited Pakistan to an extended trilateral meeting on efforts to find a negotiated settlement in Afghanistan. The meeting is slated for the 18th of this month in Moscow. The Russian state media reports that the US, China, Pakistan and the Afghan government and the Taliban have been invited to the meeting. Pakistan has already announced its backing on Moscow's efforts for peace in Afghanistan. Last month, Russia's presidential envoy for Afghanistan visited Pakistan, where he discussed the proposal. The planned meeting coincides with a renewed American push to accelerate the peace process. For the purpose, U.S. envoy Zalmay Khalilzad called on Pakistan's Army Chief General Qamar Javed Bajwa earlier this week. The U.S. is also planning to request the UN to convene a meeting of regional countries to develop a unified approach for supporting the peace process. And for more on this, we are joined by Victoria Fontan, an international political analyst from France. Fontan, thank you very much for your time at Indus News. First of all, Moscow has invited Pakistan, the US, China, the Afghan government and the Taliban for a meeting on the Afghan peace process. How do you think this meeting is important when the US-backed talks are already underway in Doha?
Well, thank you for your invitation. I think it's a really important step towards a regional approach to peace in Afghanistan, as opposed to a bilateral approach between the United States and the Taliban. And this is very much akin to the regional response to the terrorist threat in the Sahel region of Africa. So I think that a similar model is being thought of for the region surrounding Afghanistan, and hopefully the peace talks are going to take a new pace as a result of this regionalization of the response to the situation and the crisis that Afghanistan is going through.
Victoria, the US has proposed change of venue of the peace talks from Qatar to Turkey after the Taliban demanded to shift the venue. So what do you think could be the reason behind this?
Well, the reason is that the United States has made an internal promise during the recent political campaign to actually withdraw forces from Afghanistan. Now, it's very clear now to the Biden administration that there needs to be a military presence, an international military presence in Afghanistan. So in giving some leverage to other military forces, specifically Turkey, Germany, but also Azerbaijan, the United States is ensuring that it is fulfilling a campaign promise, but at the same time, it is keeping some NATO troops presence on the ground. And of course, Turkey is the perfect legitimate ally to let's say, represent this NATO presence on the ground in Afghanistan.
Victoria, Pakistan has been warning the world against peace spoilers in the Afghan peace process. Do you think India was not invited due to its objectionable role in the peace process?
Well, I would say that it was not invited because it promises a lot but delivers very little. In that sense, there is no role for India with regards to the peace process in Afghanistan at present. They are not delivering a significant aid towards reconstruction, and at the same time, they are not involved in the security, let's say, elements that could be spoiling the peace process as other regional countries would be. So in that sense, India is redundant to that particular part of the process.
Victoria Fontan, thank you very much for talking to Indus News. I really appreciate that. Now, moving on, Iran's President Hassan Rouhani has described new U.S. sanctions as oppression against the country. The new curbs barred two Revolutionary Guard officials from visiting the United States. They were blacklisted over alleged human rights violations during last year's protests in Iran. Speaking at a cabinet session, Rouhani urged the White House not to undermine efforts to restore the 2015 nuclear deal. He reiterated that Iran will return to its commitments as soon as the U.S. lifts sanctions. Tensions between the two countries rose in 2018 when former U.S. President Donald Trump withdrew Washington from the deal and imposed sanctions on Iran. Responding, Iran cut compliance with the deal, enabling itself to enrich uranium beyond allowed limits. Since then, European powers are trying to salvage the deal, but little has been done to this effect. For more on this, we are joined by David M. Hudson-Horn, an international political analyst. Thank you very much for your time at Indus News. The U.S. has imposed new sanctions in Iran targeting two officials of Revolutionary Guards. Would these sanctions not further escalate tensions between the two countries?
Well, there's no question that it is escalating tensions, as you just described, the reaction from President Rouhani. Of course, we have to understand these sanctions and what's happening in the context of the dance that's going on between Washington and Tehran over restarting negotiations about the Iran nuclear deal, the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action, the JCPOA. In fact, we saw over the weekend President Rouhani change his tune somewhat. He had a visit from the Irish Foreign Minister, Simon Coveney. Ireland has been appointed as a facilitator in the JCPOA process, and he said that Iran was ready to resume its commitments under the nuclear deal if, in fact, the U.S. lifted all sanctions. But this, of course, was a change from Iran having recently rejected an idea of coming back to the negotiating table so far. So we have this back and forth, one side escalating, the other side trying to then de-escalate. At some point, we know they're going to have to hold hands and jump together, get back into the water on the discussions going forward, or we'll just have this stalemate for this foreseeable future.
Okay, so after recent U.S. attacks on Iranian targets in Syria, Iran's continuing violations of the JCPOA, and then these latest sanctions, are there any sort of chances of the revival of the deal?
Well, you know, of course, everybody is hoping, especially here in Brussels, where I'm based for Politico at the EU, that these talks can resume, despite all the extra noise that's going on around this. Now, we know that there's a lot of baggage here. You heard Anthony Blinken, the Secretary of State, recently talking about Robert Levinson, an American CIA operative, believed, who disappeared in Iran 14 years ago, demanding that Tehran come up with an explanation for his whereabouts and what happened to him. Lots of noise on both sides, but the ultimate goal being to get them back to the negotiating table with the EU as a facilitator to try to get everybody back in compliance with the nuclear deal.
David M. Hudson-Horn, thank you very much for talking to Indus News. We really appreciate that. Now, moving on, Armenia's Prime Minister Nikol Pashinyan has relieved the country's Chief of General Staff, Onik Gasparyan, of his duties. The Prime Minister announced the move in a statement days after President Armen Sarkisian refused to sign the decree to dismiss Gasparyan. Pashinyan has been under pressure from the military to step down following a deadly conflict with Azerbaijan. The Prime Minister called the demand an attempted coup and began legal proceedings to force out the army's top general. Last month, large protests flooded the streets of Yerevan. Some came out against the Prime Minister, but many others heeded Pashinyan's call to rally in support of the government. The UN Security Council has failed to agree on a statement to condemn the coup in Myanmar. However, the Council has called for restraint by the military and threatened to consider further measures.
Diplomats said talks on the statement would likely continue after China, Russia, India, and Vietnam suggested amendments to a British draft. Meanwhile, the United States says it is repulsed by Myanmar's army's continued use of lethal force against its people. State Department spokesperson Ned Price urged the military to exercise maximum restraint. In Myanmar, security forces have launched a raid on the compound of striking rail workers. The workers are observing a strike as part of the civil disobedience movement against the military rule. Some Myanmar police have fled to India after refusing orders to shoot at the protesters. According to New Delhi, around 100 people from Myanmar, mostly policemen, have crossed over into India so far since the protests began.
It's time for a short break. We'll be back with more stories. Stay tuned. Welcome back. Libya's parliament has voiced confidence in the new interim government formed by Prime Minister Abdul Hamid Dabibe. The Prime Minister's cabinet was approved by 132 votes to 2 at a session in Sarat. Speaking to the parliament later, Dabibe said Libyans have expressed a message of unity through this vote, but the expansive size of the cabinet has drawn criticism in Libya with accusations of corruption and influence peddling. In February, he was selected in a UN-sponsored inter-Libyan dialogue and tasked to form a new government. Under the plan, he has until March the 19th to lead the transition up to polls in December. Israeli police have detained the Imam of Al-Aqsa Mosque after raiding his house in occupied East Jerusalem. Authorities have given no reason for his detention. He was arrested multiple times in the past. In January last year, Israel banned him from entering Al-Aqsa for 4 months. Meanwhile, dozens of Israeli settlers have stormed the mosque compound. Al-Aqsa is one of the holiest places of worship for Muslims. Saudi Arabia says Houthis' attacks on oil installations in the kingdom are attacks on the global economy. In a meeting chaired by King Salman bin Abdulaziz Al Saud, the Saudi cabinet reviewed defensive measures to protect oil facilities. The cabinet said attacks targeting Ras Taruna port and a residential area in Dhahran are blatant violations of international law. It renewed call for the international community to stand against these actions directed against civilian objects and vital installations. The Houthis have ramped up attacks against Saudi installations, including the international airport, military and oil facilities. Turkey says it has neutralized 25 militants of the Kurdistan Workers' Party in northern Iraq. In an interview, Turkish Defense Minister Hulusi Akar said the militants were targeted in an air operation in the Hakuk and the Kandil regions. Hulusi Akar said Ankara continues its struggle against all threats by the PKK and the ISIS. He said Turkey is determined to save its people from the scourge of terrorism. Ankara holds the fighter group responsible for the deaths of some 40,000 people in a 30-year terror campaign. The UN Human Rights Office has condemned the killing of 9 activists by the Philippines police over the weekend. In a news briefing, a spokesperson for the office, Ravina Shamdasani, said they are appalled by the arbitrary killing of 9 activists. She urged the government of President Rodrigo Duterte to investigate the incident and said the recent killings indicate an escalation of violence, intimidation, and harassment. The Duterte administration has sought to rid the country of its decades-long insurgency problem, but rights groups have warned that the threat no longer makes a distinction between armed rebels and other rights defenders. South Korea has agreed to a 13.9% increase in its contribution to hosting U.S. troops for 2021. The biggest annual rise in nearly 2 decades takes the country's contribution to over $1 billion. Seoul's chief negotiator, Jong Eun-bo, said the agreement will reaffirm the importance of the alliance. Meanwhile, the foreign ministry said the boost to contribution is in line with its annual defense budget increase. In a statement, the ministry added both the sides agreed to freeze Seoul's contribution for the year 2020. South Korea hosts around 28,500 U.S. soldiers as deterrents to North Korea. Nigerian special forces have killed 33 Boko Haram fighters in clashes in the country's northeastern Borno state. Nigerian media said 2 members of the armed forces have also been killed, while 7 others are wounded. It said the army confiscated a significant amount of ammunition. It added forces also cleared an abandoned village with terrorists assembled to plan attacks. So over the past months, insurgents have targeted Nigerian soldiers in multiple ambushes. Boko Haram and its offshoot terrorist organization have killed thousands and displaced millions in northeastern Nigeria. Brazil has reported nearly a record 1,972 deaths from COVID-19 in a day, and its fatalities crossed 268,000. Globally, the virus has claimed more than 2.6 million lives and infected over 117 million people so far. More in this report.
The issues related to the coronavirus vaccine, such as inequitable distribution and politicization, are increasing by the day. People's Vaccine Alliance said rich nations are inoculating one person every second, while a majority of the poorest nations is yet to give even a single dose. Mexico is turning to China to fill a vaccine shortage a week after the United States ruled out sharing vaccines with the country in the short term. Meanwhile, the United States House of Representatives has cleared President Joe Biden's $1.9 trillion coronavirus relief bill for a final vote. The House voted 219 to 210 along party lines to advance the bill for a final vote. Commenting on changes to his relief program, Biden said the aid has reached smaller businesses, plus women-owned and minority-owned firms.
With this new program, and we're going to continue this, by the way, it's not only, you've been the only businesses with fewer than 20 folks to apply the last couple of weeks. But now we're going to keep the focus on it because a lot of minority-owned businesses, women-owned businesses are increased significantly by 20 and 15%.
In Europe, drug maker Johnson & Johnson has told the European Union that it is facing supply issues that may complicate the delivery of 55 million vaccine doses to the bloc. Meanwhile, British lawmakers say the United Kingdom's COVID-19 test and trace system has not yet proven its worth. The Parliament's Public Accounts Committee decreed the unimaginable cost of the program, saying there is little evidence of its overall effectiveness. Over in France, the number of COVID-19 patients in ICUs is at the highest level since the end of November.
What is worrying is that the pressure and the limit being reached is mainly on the intensive care unit beds. There's still a bit of leeway, but ICU beds in our region and a few other regions, we are starting to reach the limits of saturation. This disease is still killing around 10,000 people every month in France. So this is a serious disease.
The daily infections in Turkey rose to 2-month highs more than a week after President announced an easing of measures. Palestinian Prime Minister Mohammed Shtayyeh said hospitals are overfull with ICUs operating at 100% capacity with coronavirus patients.
Pakistan has announced new COVID-19 restrictions following a surge in the number of infections. The measures were unveiled by the National Command and Operations Center, the organization spearheading efforts to tackle coronavirus in the country. Under the new measures, educational institutions in 7 cities of Punjab will be closed for 2 weeks, starting from the 15th of March. Authorities have also deferred the decision to lift restrictions on indoor weddings, dine-in restaurants and cinemas. Meanwhile, the country has begun its second immunization drive, vaccinating citizens above 60 years of age. Pakistan has so far recorded 13,354 deaths and over 595,000 infections since the first case reported in February last year. Over 565,000 people have recovered. Russia says it is slowing down the speed of Twitter in retaliation for its alleged failure to remove banned content. In a statement, Moscow's media watchdog threatened a total ban on the microblogging platform if it doesn't comply with its demands. It said the move aims to protect Russian citizens. Earlier, Moscow sued 5 social media platforms for failing to delete posts urging children to support anti-Kremlin protests. Twitter is the 6th biggest social media site in Russia and is widely used by opposition figures. The move escalates a growing standoff between Moscow and the US-based social media firms. Germany says it wants to explore the possibility of a joint sanctions policy with the US amid improved relations. Foreign Minister Heiko Maas says the transatlantic partners should act together to defend their common interests and values. At an event, Maas said the joint sanctions will target countries over human rights and other abuses. Maas lamented what he believed was the lack of coordinated action under former US President Donald Trump. His tenure was marked by intense pressure on Germany over its spending obligations in NATO and Nord Stream 2. However, Berlin has recently taken steps to meet Washington's concerns. The United States says it is reviewing former President Donald Trump's designation of Cuba as a state sponsor of terrorism. However, the White House said a broader Cuba policy shift is not currently among President Joe Biden's top priorities. White House spokesperson Jen Psaki said a careful review of the Trump-era's policy decisions is underway. Talking to reporters, Psaki reiterated Washington's commitment to making human rights a core pillar of U.S. policy. She added a guiding principle for Cuba policy will be support for democracy and human rights. The Trump administration returned Havana to the U.S. list of state sponsors of terrorism 9 days before the exit. Portugal's President Marcelo Rebelo de Sousa has been sworn in for his second term as head of the state. The inauguration came with a message of hope after a year of pandemic. At his swearing-in ceremony, de Sousa pledged to defend, comply and enforce the constitution. Addressing the parliament, he said his mission will be to end fear and restore confidence in the people. De Sousa expressed his desire for the next 5 years to be more a reason for hope than disappointment.
May the next 5 years be more a reason for hope than disappointment. That's our dream and purpose. A year has passed under so much mourning, so much sacrifice, so much solitude. We must believe. We will believe.
Buckingham Palace says the race issues raised by the Duke and Duchess of Sussex are concerning and taken very seriously. In a statement, the palace said recollections may vary, but the matters will be addressed privately. It said the royal family is saddened to learn the full extent of how challenging the last few years have been for Harry and Meghan. It added that Prince Harry, his wife and their son will always be much loved family members. Meanwhile, British television host Piers Morgan has left ITV's show following thousands of complaints in a row over Meghan. The anchor has been a constant critic of the couple, drawing backlash from viewers and an investigation by a media watchdog. More stories to follow right after a short break. Stay tuned. Welcome back. The World Health Organization says 1 in 3 women globally have been subjected to physical or sexual violence across their lifetime. The agency says the pervasive practice has been exacerbated during the pandemic. More in this report.
Violence against women and girls is a hidden global crisis which knows no boundaries of geography or culture. The World Health Organization says up to 852 million women are estimated to have experienced violence from age 15. According to the data, intimate partner violence was found to be the most widespread. The report suggests that violence against women is an endemic in every country and culture, but it says women living in low-income countries are more likely to be affected.
I would say that firstly that the rates are unacceptably high everywhere. But there are regions where it is high, very high, and these include Oceania, Sub-Saharan Africa, and Southern Asia.
The health agency's officials say boys should be taught in school about the need for mutual respect in relationships and mutual consent. The World Health Body has urged the governments to tackle the economic inequalities and prevent violence.
These numbers are very shocking and really are sort of a wake-up call for governments to be doing much more to prevent this violence. And prevention entails actions at many different levels and in many different sectors.
The agency says it is afraid the true figure is likely to be significantly higher, given heavy stigma and underreporting of sexual abuse.
The U.S. state of Hawaii has declared an emergency proclamation as it struggles with the widespread damage from flooding. The move came after a dam overflowed on the island of Maui, forcing evacuations and destroying homes. In a tweet, Hawaii's governor David Ige said proclamation will free up state funds to assist those impacted by the weather. Poor weather is expected to continue through Friday as flood advisories stayed in place for a second day. Officials say a number of houses have been destroyed or damaged by flash floods. There are no other immediate reports of injuries or casualties. Russia and China have signed a memorandum of understanding to set up an international lunar research station. Moscow and Beijing will draw up a roadmap to establish the International Scientific Lunar Station and cooperate closely on the project. Russia's space agency Roscosmos said under the deal they will develop a complex of experimental research facilities created on the surface or in the orbit of the moon. China's National Space Administration said the project was open to all interested countries and international partners. Earlier this week, China and France reaffirmed their commitment to working together in the field of space exploration. Art collectors and enthusiasts have had trouble acquiring pieces from the famous street artist Banksy, but due to the efforts of a Munich-based curator, they can now enjoy the artist's work in one place. This report has more.
Little is known about the identity of Banksy, but even anonymously, he has earned worldwide acclaim for his witty, subversive street art. Spread throughout the country and sometimes removed by property owners or the state, Banksy's art is not always accessible. After extensive effort, Oliver Foster has now gathered what he calls the most extensive collection of the artist's work.
So we have around more than 100 artworks that involve installations, prints, sculpture, mapping. So the whole idea that we have it is just create a whole experience to you to understand the whole job of Banksy. So the most important thing is like you come over here and discover how Banksy developed all the speech around like the whole career that he had.
Comprised of available prints and lovingly reproduced installations, Foster wants to allow as many people as possible to see Banksy's development as an artist. For viewers, there is a mix of world-famous and the lesser-known, including Girl with Balloon. This was originally painted as a mural on London's Waterloo Bridge. An original painting of the work shredded itself with a mechanism hidden in its frame moments after selling for more than $1.4 million in an auction in 2018.
I really think like the whole message about Banksy is like we need to be more humans. This society right now is very weird for me. So we are in the cutting edge moment, like humanity. We can see all the changes and all the bad things that we made it. And I think Banksy is the best way to make a reflection about this and thinking about it.
The Munich exhibition runs until May 2nd under the usual coronavirus restrictions.
Movies Nomadland and Rocks are leading the nominations of this year's British Academy of Film and Television Arts Awards. The recession drama and coming-of-age story each have 7 nods. More about the event and contenders in this report.
Virtual nominees with no audience, but BAFTA promises to offer 2 award shows this year, as the organizers say they're determined to celebrate film. Details of how it will work are yet to be released, but there will be a show on Saturday night, as well as the announced date of the awards on Sunday, April 11th. As a huge change, more than half of the 24 nominees this year are actors of color. Last year, when BAFTA revealed an all-white acting contenders list, it sparked an online outcry with the hashtag BAFTAsSoWhite trending on social media. The backlash led BAFTA to conduct a wide-ranging review, resulting in expanded membership. This year, there is a new long list voting round and an increase in all 4 acting categories and Best Director to 6 nominees from 5.
So the long list, by its very nature, was quite a long list of names, and the nominations were taken from that. But at every stage, it was about levelling the playing field, not guaranteeing a nomination. And that was really important to us that, as I say, people are getting through on merit because they are excellent films, excellent performances.
As for those in the running, leading the nominations are U.S. recession drama Nomadland and Rocks. Nomadland, about a community of van dwellers, was also nominated for the Best Film and Adapted Screenplay. The movie has had a successful start to the awards season, earning 2 Golden Globes. Family drama The Father, Hollywood throwback Mank, Me Too revenge movie Promising Young Women, and Korean language Minari are contenders at Britain's top movie honors. 4 of the 6 Best Director nominees are women. This year's leading actors nominees include Riz Ahmed for his portrayal of a heavy metal drummer going deaf in The Sound of Metal. Others include Ardesh Gaurav for The White Tiger and Tahar Rahim for The Mauritianan. As for the actresses, Buki Bakre is nominated for Rocks and Frances McDormand for Nomadland. The other contenders are Radha Blank for the 40-year-old version, Vanessa Kirby for Pieces of a Woman, Wunmi Mosaku for His House, and Alfred Woodard for Clemency. The BAFTAs will take place virtually from London's Royal Albert Hall.
Lows and the highs of the business world now. Russia says OPEC plus oil producers will aim to ensure price stability that shows a balance between the producers and consumers. Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov said this in a joint news conference with his Saudi counterpart Prince Faisal bin Farhan in Riyadh. He said a recent Houthi attack on Saudi oil facilities is unacceptable. Lavrov said Moscow and Riyadh have planned to develop cooperation within OPEC+. Prince Faisal said the kingdom will take deterrent action to protect its oil facilities. Earlier, Saudi authorities termed the attacks on the kingdom's oil installations as an assault on the global economy. China's consumer price index declined 0.2% year-on-year in February. However, the decline falls short of a 0.3% forecast by economists. According to data from the National Bureau of Statistics, the index dropped by 0.2% in cities and 0.1% in rural areas. Both food prices and non-food prices fell 0.2% year-on-year during the month. Meanwhile, China's producer price index went up 1.7% year-on-year in February, exceeding expectations. The surge is propped up by rising global commodity prices and greater domestic demand. The Wall Street stocks have jumped over tepid inflation data, easing worries about rising prices that have jolted yields higher. Tech stocks continued their comeback following the subdued inflation data. This lifted the Nasdaq composite to trade nearly 2% higher. The indices of S&P 500 and DJI have also traded about 1% up. Meanwhile, oil prices have surged over OPEC plus output curbs. Time to take a look at the weather situation from around the world. And that's all for now with the latest updates. You can follow us on social media at Indus News.